Welcome back to the Dirt Show. Lots of developments, lots of scary things happening in the world. Before we get to Iran, which is the most scary, I want to spend just a minute talking about the political assassinations in Minnesota. This horrible, this guy who apparently was appointed by Governor Walz to something. Again, I'm not blaming him at all. Just decided to kill elected officials. He killed two of them. He wounded two of them. He was gonna kill more. One of them was away on vacation. I think we're going to see more political assassinations. I really do. In my new book, The Preventive State, always have to have an opportunity to talk about that. My first chapter is about political assassinations, and it's about the two attempts to assassinate President Trump. We now know that Iran was also involved. Assassinations in Minnesota are going to continue. And by the way, to relate the two subjects, if the United States, as I hope it will do, helps Israel destroy Iran's nuclear reactors and maybe even helps them topple the regime, I think one of the consequences may be political assassinations by Iran. Remember that Iran has put out fatwas on Americans. They put out fatwas on Mike Pompeo. I was on a vacation with Mike Pompeo a year ago on a cruise, a boat, and he had to be surrounded by guards the whole time. My friend Erwin Kalla, who is the former Attorney General and Minister of Justice of Canada, can't leave his home without Royal Mounted Police guarding him. The Iranians have specialized in assassinations and attempted assassinations, and I think that will continue. And so, in my book, The Preventive State, I argue that we have to take more action to prevent these kinds of assassination. We have to use intelligence, and we have to use artificial intelligence and other means of trying to red flag and prevent these kinds of things. And I lay that all out in The Preventive State. And by the way, thank you again. I really appreciate it. I've gotten so many letters, including today, from people who have bought the book and have bought it in order to support me, basically, against the Harvard Club, against the New York Times, against others. So thank you. And if you haven't bought the book yet, I think people have told me they've enjoyed it and they've learned from it. So again, appreciate very, very much if you go on Amazon and buy the book. It's not expensive, and I think it's a good read. But let's turn now to Iran. All right, we know that within the last couple of hours, the president of the United States left a meeting of his security group with the vice president, the attorney general, the secretary of state, the secretary of defense. And we know what the subject was. The subject was what else the United States can do in relation to Israel's current war against Iran and Iran's current war against Israel. Remember, too, these are not symmetrical. Don't believe when the New York Times says exchange of rockets. There's no exchange of rockets. Israel is targeting surgical military targets, and Iran is killing babies and mothers and targeting every possible civilian target they can get in the most highly populated areas of Tel Aviv and Haifa. So there's no comparison, but we know that, and the president said that in his recent statement when he said, we know where you are, Ayatollah. We could easily kill you and get you, but we're not going to, at least for now. But stop sending rockets against civilians. And I think the message was clear. If you continue to do that, you become an obvious target. And so, Trump is sending a we haven't heard the results of the meeting yet. So I'm speaking based on what has been said previously and speculation. The president has said that like Winston Churchill and FDR, um, unconditional surrender. That's the only thing that will stop Israel from continuing its surgical attacks on the Iranian military. Unconditional surrender. That doesn't mean regime change. I'm hoping there will be, but that doesn't mean that. It means unconditional surrender of your nuclear capacity, giving up Fardo, giving up all the other areas that are now being used to develop nuclear weapons. Of course, the New York Times and CNN saying, oh, Iran never was trying to develop nuclear weapons. That's only, Trump and Israel. No, no, they're good guys. They're not trying to develop nuclear weapons. And Tucker Carlson is going along with them, and others are going along with them. That's just total nonsense. Of course, they were trying to develop nuclear weapons, and they were on the way to doing it. And Israeli intelligence picked up a change in its speed of trying to accomplish it. The United States said, well, it'll take them 3 years to create a deliverable nuclear bomb. First of all, probably way wrong. Probably it would take much less than that. But a deliverable bomb, that means before they can develop an intercontinental ballistic missile that can carry a bomb, that's not the only way to use a nuclear weapon. If you have a nuclear weapon, you can give it to your surrogates, to terrorist groups. You can give it to Hamas. You can give it to Hezbollah. You can give it to the Houthis. And they could use it as terrorism. And when you do that, you can not only use it against Israel, you can use it against the United States and against American allies and against European countries. So they were a lot closer. And by the way, what rule says you have to take chances? You base your decisions on likelihoods and probabilities, and the likelihood and probability that Iran would develop at least some kind of nuclear arsenal quickly was evident to Israel, and Israel had to make the decision. And I predicted it on the show, I predicted it in my writings, that if Israel was successful in the first foray, and they were, that Trump would join them. And as I've said before, victory has many parents and failure is an orphan. And Israel succeeded beyond all expectations, and Trump said, "Hey, I'm with you." Now we'll see how far he goes. I do think that in the end, Israel must destroy the Fardo nuclear facility buried under a mountain. If it fails to do that, then it will have achieved a great success in setting back Iran's nuclear program a bit, but Iran will emerge victorious. It will say, gee, look, Israel sent everything they could against us. They killed all of our leaders. They killed all of our nuclear scientists, but we still have Fardo. And therefore, the regime should survive, and therefore, we've won. And that's why they can't be allowed to end this conflict with Fardo intact. And Israel has to be able to figure out a way of getting Fardo. Now, already we've heard from some of the diplomats and strategic people in Israel, even if we don't get the bunker busting bombs, there are other ways. But the other ways are very challenging. Yes, they could send in Marines. They can send in troops on the ground, but that would be very risky and would have lots and lots of casualties on both sides. It would be much, much better if Fardo could be destroyed from the air. So far, there have been as far as I know, no Israeli military casualties, no pilots. There have been obviously many, many, many Israeli civilian casualties, including some Arab families and some young people and some others who are civilians. And all the casualties on the Iranian side have been, for the most part, military people, military leaders, nuclear scientists who are military because they're working for the military to develop a nuclear bomb. I think it was Benjamin Netanyahu, or maybe it was Ron Derma, who said Israel's destroying and killing all these nuclear scientists These nuclear scientists were the Manhattan Project. They were the people who were trying to develop the bomb in much the way American scientists were trying to develop the bomb. And scientists who are trying to develop a weapon are, under international law, legitimate military targets. But a family in northern Israel, a family of Arabs in northern Israel, Israeli citizens, are not a legitimate target. It's a war crime to target. And yet, we haven't heard from the International Criminal Court. Are they asleep? We haven't heard from the International Court of Justice. We haven't heard, as far as I can tell, we haven't heard from any human rights organization. None. I don't know. Maybe you've heard, but I haven't. Where's Human Rights Watch? Where are these other organizations that complain every time Israel kills a single person? There's a complaint. But where are these organizations now that Iran is sending rockets, very, very powerful rockets, into the middle of downtown Tel Aviv, in the middle of downtown Haifa, and the middle of downtown highly populated areas? Where are these human rights organizations? I can tell you where they are. They don't give a damn about human rights. They only care about human wrongs, the human wrongs inflicted against Israel. They don't care about that. They are so one-sided, so biased. Where's George Soros? Where are all those people who claim to care about human rights? Where are the people who are protesting? They're still protesting. They're protesting in favor of Iran. A friend of mine who is a politician just wrote to me and said she has had protests in front of her office, and they're pro-Iran. Why would anybody be pro-Iran? Okay, you can even maybe understand pro-Palestinian, though you know my views that nobody is pro-Palestinian. They're just anti-Israel. But this proves it. Pro-Iran, pro the Ayatollahs who murder women in cold blood because they are improperly dressed, the Ayatollahs who murder gays, throw them off roofs, who hang them, who kill dissidents. You know how many MEK dissidents have been murdered? Tens and tens of thousands. You're protesting for Iran? No, you're not really protesting for Iran. You're always protesting against Israel. This is anti-Semitism, pure and simple. Double standard applied to Israel, to Zionism, to Jews, and to American support for Israel. So these bigots who are protesting for Iran, thankfully, universities are on recess. If universities were holding classes now, we'd see these useful idiots parading around, not with Palestinian flags, but with Iranian flags. We will see gays for Iran. Yeah, gays for Iran. Can you imagine any gay person supporting Iran? Women, feminists for Iran. Yeah, all right. They've killed lots of women for not wearing their head covered, but we can excuse them because they're against the Jews. And if they're against the Jews and they're against Israel and they're against Zionism, we'll excuse them for anything. Transgender people for Iran. Yeah. You can imagine what it must be like to be a transgender person living in Iran. Probably even worse than living in Gaza or living in other places where Israel's enemies are in control. But the hypocrisy knows no bounds. But again, silence. Where are the human rights organizations? Why are they not complaining against the Ayatollah ordering, there's no doubt about this, ordering rockets to be directed at civilians? He said that. He's ordered that. There's proof of that. ICC, quiet. Human Rights Watch, quiet. Everybody, quiet. One Arab is killed by an Israeli. My God, it's the worst thing that's ever happened in the world, even if they were harboring Hamas and helping them. So, the hypocrisy is just absolutely rampant. So the Israeli government can't call for regime change. They say that's up to the people of Iran. The United States government can't call for regime change. I'm calling for regime change. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do to get rid of the Ayatollahs by whatever means are necessary. Put them on trial, treat them as war criminals, treat them as combatants, whatever it takes to get them out of power. Encourage. Don't do what you did when the Green Revolution started, where the United States did nothing to help the Iranian people. The Iranian people want to overthrow this government, these tyrants, these murderers. They want to overthrow them. They need our help, and we should be giving them that help. So I'm completely in favor of regime change, and I think if the United States helps Israel destroy the Fordo nuclear mountain, that will encourage regime change. I think also President Trump saying to the people of Tehran, leave the city. Now, hundreds of thousands of people are leaving. I think there are 14 million people in Tehran, though. It's a lot of people. And remember, too, Iran has almost 100 million people, and it's an enormous, enormous country. Israel's the size of New Jersey, is 9 million people. But they have a pretty good intelligence service, and they did a pretty good job preparing for the attack last Thursday night. They had people in Iran and drones in Iran. And I think, as somebody said today, the entire Iran is wired by the Mossad. And head of Mossad is a friend of mine, David Barnea. He's a wonderful man. He loves my wife. Every time I visit him, he gives me cookies from my wife. I don't think the cookies have tracking devices in them. No, but I wouldn't put it past. I mean, when you get something from the Mossad, you have to be careful. I mean, if they gave me a walkie-talkie or a pager, I think I'd leave it home. As you know, President Trump received a gift, and Vice President Vance both received gifts from Prime Minister Netanyahu after the events in Hezbollah. They received a gold-plated and a silver-plated radio or whatever that could blow up, walkie-talkie, just to remind the President and the Vice President of the United States how creative Israeli intelligence could be. So, my hope, my goal, maybe by tomorrow we'll know that the President of the United States takes it one step further and says, yeah, you can get the bunker busting bombs. Yes, you can get the B-2s. And yes, if there is going to be regime change, we would not oppose it. Let's see. All right, we have a new development. I have a sponsor. So I have to read you about my sponsor. They're a gold company called Gold Co. And it's a perfect sponsor. I turned down a number of sponsors, but I like Gold Co. because I myself own gold. I have always owned gold. I've given gold as gifts to my children and my grandchildren because I believe that it's an ultimate hedge against inflation and other forms of economic disaster. So here is my new commercial. If you're concerned about where this economy is headed, you're not alone. Did you know you can roll over your 401k, your IRA, or existing retirement accounts into physical gold and silver, tax and penalty free? I've done that. I bought a gold bar. It's so nice holding in your hand a piece of gold, knowing that it will never lose its value. I'm sponsored now by Gold Co., a top-rated precious metals company. They have a dedicated team of specialists who make the process seamless. Gold and silver have been used as a store of value for centuries and as a hedge against market risk and inflation. That's why I have it. Go to AlanLikesGold.com for more information. Gold Co. is offering an exclusive 2025 gold and silver kit, and it's free. You could also qualify for up to 10% in free silver with no maximum limit. So go to allenlikesgold.com, allenlikesgold.com, or click on the link in the video description. At the very least, you owe it to yourself to find out how you can diversify your savings, tax and penalty free with gold and silver. So, I found a sponsor who I can really get behind, because I'm a believer in having gold in your portfolio and in your retirement account. So do it. Get some gold, and you feel more secure. Okay, let's turn to some letters. Why are we even talking about a preemptive strike on Iran? Israel does not need to give a reason for attacking Iran. Israel and Iran are at war. They have been in outright war for several years due to Iranian proxy buildup, et cetera, et cetera. No, I think that's absolutely right. Even if Israel didn't have a preemptive right to attack, to prevent Iran from developing and deploying a nuclear. They had the right to respond. They had the right to respond to attacks. After all, Iran sent hundreds of missiles into Israel a year ago. And so Israel can pick the time and place of response. So I agree with you completely. You don't need a preemptive justification. Next letter. Tucker Carlson has been acting like a complete idiot. I don't want to comment on personalities. I used to be in Tucker Carlson's show quite a bit, and then we had a fight because he was very anti-immigrant, and I pointed out that he is the grandson of immigrants, and I don't think he liked that. And so I haven't been on his show for years now, but he's a smart guy, but his views toward Israel and toward American foreign policy are not my views. And so, although I wouldn't use negative words toward him, I want to be very clear that I hope the President of the United States doesn't follow the advice of Tucker Carlson or some of the others on the extreme isolationist right, who don't understand that it's in the interest of the United States, forget about Israel, the interest of the United States to see regime change in Iran. And that regime change in Iran is different from regime change in Libya and in Iraq and in Syria, none of which have any traditions of democracy or civil liberties. The Iranian people, the Persian people are very, very, very different. So I'm much more encouraged. One of the two known funders of the current round of unrest, these are protests, is Code Pink, which has documented ties to the Chinese Communist Party for funding. Code Pink is a despicable organization. It's very anti-American, very anti-Semitic, very anti-Christian, very anti-everything decent. So anything that has to do with Code Pink, you should view very, very negatively. Professor Dershowitz, can you please make us parents a list of universities that aren't woke and will be safe for our children? We want to know where we can send them, where they'll get properly educated and non-indoctrinated. You're not going to like my answer. My answer is send them to Harvard, send them to Yale, send them to Columbia, send them to the best schools they can get into, as long as they have the thick skin and the ability to fight back. Developing an ability to, not accept what you've been told is a very important part of college. So I would not compromise. Look, there are great schools, really, really first-rate schools that don't have the problems that Harvard has. For example, Emory College, where my wife graduated, is a wonderful school that hasn't had these problems. Vanderbilt is a wonderful school that hasn't had these problems. I got an honorary degree from a school in Florida called the New College. That doesn't have those problems. There were protests, but it doesn't have the same problem. So, but don't compromise your children's education. Don't let them win. Don't let them chase you away from the best school and the most suitable school for your children. Pick the school that's most suited child's abilities and needs, and encourage them to go to that school. Okay. Um, what if Iran gave up its nuclear capabilities fully in return for Israel giving up their nuclear capabilities? I saw this suggested on another page, and I'm curious your reaction. Absolutely not. Israel must have nuclear capabilities. It's a tiny little country surrounded by enemies sworn to its destruction. Israel has had, they don't admit it, but they've had nuclear weapons, a nuclear arsenal since the late 1960s. Lyndon Johnson was critical in helping that happen. But Israel's never used it. It's never used it. That's the difference. And they've never threatened to use it. They have it as an insurance policy in case they are totally up against the wall, in case they have to prevent another Holocaust. And I'm in favor completely of Israel having a massive nuclear arsenal, tactical nuclear weapons, strategic nuclear weapons, because they're not going to use them. That's the difference. Iran would use it. They've said so. The former president of Iran said, if we develop a nuclear arsenal and use it against Israel, Israel's a one-bomb state. Israel might retaliate and bomb Tehran and kill millions of people, but the trade-off would be worth it. That's not Israel's attitude. So Israel should have nuclear weapons, just the same way the United States should have nuclear weapons. But North Korea shouldn't, and Iran shouldn't, and Iran won't, because the president of the United States has made it very clear that he and the United States will not tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran. This is a good one. Democrats are amazing at picking exactly the wrong fights. I agree with you. They have picked all the wrong fights. They're fighting about immigration. The vast majority of Americans are in favor of some type of immigrant border control and getting rid of criminals. Some of them are on the wrong side of the Iran issue. So I used to be a Democrat, but I was always critical of the Democrats often picking the wrong fights. Okay. Okay, a lot of letters saying people have bought my book and they liked it. Professor, in September of 1962, a riot occurred at the University of Mississippi over the admission of the first black student, retired Air Force. I remember that. I remember it well. Veteran James Meredith. I remember James Meredith. Like Newsom then, Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett did not call out the National Guard and even removed the local police and state police who were protecting administration buildings. Kennedy mobilized the Mississippi National Guard, followed by 13,000 Army troops. Unlike Trump, Kennedy had no federal property or employees to protect. His sole justification was to enforce the mandate of the Supreme Court. In other words, he enforced the law. I agree with you. And I think a lot of the left is very hypocritical. They would have supported, and they did support, federal intervention to prevent the Ku Klux Klan from intimidating black students. They would have certainly favored cutting off of federal funding to schools, visas if the schools were coming, if foreign students were coming in, and fomenting these kinds of riots. So the left that is opposed to all of what's going on now does not pass the shoe on the other foot test. Okay. Oh, this is something calling me a hypocrite. Alan, telling us not to take the New York Times bestseller list seriously while showing his own book that brags that he's a New York Times bestselling author. It's true. The book says #1 New York Times bestselling author. But that was in 1991 when the New York Times bestseller list was fair, when they were reviewing books that they disagreed with or books that were by authors that they disagreed with. The New York Times has changed dramatically in the last 35 years. So I'm proud to have been the #1 bestseller. The book was Chutzpah. And I've had, I think, 7 other New York Times bestsellers, but I haven't had one since I defended Donald Trump. And I haven't had a book reviewed since I defended Donald Trump. The New York Times has become the Pravda of the left. And so don't expect to be treated fairly if you're not on their side of the political narrative. And so, I don't think it's hypocritical. Um, uh, Finally, please don't belittle Letters to a Young Lawyer. I talked about how the Times had reviewed all of my books, even less serious ones like Letters to a Young Lawyer. This writer says it's probably my favorite book of yours. So thank you. I'm happy if you think any of my children are your favorite or any of your books are my favorite. I've written 57 of them. And, but, I have my own 4 or 5 favorites and others that are not so favorite. So, I hope to continue to write books for a long time. But, final word, this is my favorite, The Preventive State, and clearly my favorite in terms of the one, if I had to have one book be associated with me in the future, it would be The Preventive State, because it really, I think, sets out the need for how to control and how to constrain this development, this important and unnoticed development that we're moving much more toward prevention and away from reaction. So if you're going to read one book, read the one book that I think I'm the most proud of having written, The Preventive State. Thanks. See you tomorrow. We'll see by tomorrow. We may have some real news about what the Trump administration is doing, and I'll surely be on top of that.